I want to ask you about the anti-Semitism we're seeing, particularly in the UK. Jews say they don't feel safe going out in London on weekends where there are these mass rallies. And we've now got a former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis, saying that the BBC is adding to that climate. He says the BBC is institutionally anti-Semitic, and its reporting on the Hamas war has led to some of this ill feeling and hostility and sometimes attacks against British Jews. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a very fair assessment. And, the BBC is notoriously biased against Israel and has been for many, many years now. All of their reporting on Israel is very heavily slanted. And in fact, in 2021, the Simon Wiesenthal Center in the United States, which predominantly deals with Holocaust-related issues and anti-Semitism, they publish an annual list of the most anti-Semitic organizations in the world. And in 2021, the BBC came in number 3 on their list of anti-Semitic organizations, just behind. Number 1 was Iran, number 2 was Hamas, number 3 was the BBC. So this is not something that's... I'm not jesting. And this is... you can find all this online. And it's something that's been going on for a very, very long time. And I think, what's not clear is whether or not the staff of the BBC actually believe what they pump out in their anti-Israel propaganda, or whether they just want to do it to suit their own agendas. And of course, their agenda is not just anti-Israel; it's anti-the West, it's anti-British values, exactly. And it's very much in favour of the extreme left, where there is, of course, an intersectionality with anti-Israelism. But it's not just the BBC. There are many other media organisations in the UK, particularly broadcast media, which are also heavily slanted against Israel and indeed against the West. And they do have, in my view, blood on their hands because, and it's not just them either. It's not just media. It's the organisations like the UN. It's international organisations like the EU. It's so-called human rights organisations, which play into Hamas's hands. Hamas want Israel to be condemned for killing Gazan civilians, and therefore Hamas constructs their military operations in a way that will maximize the number of deaths among their own civilian populations. Israel tries very hard and succeeds in reducing civilian deaths. But, of course, inevitably in the situation, the way that Hamas fights, some are inevitable, and a large number have happened, unfortunately. And when people condemn Israel for fighting within the laws of armed conflict and for inadvertently incurring civilian deaths, they play right into Hamas's hands and encourage them more and more. And that, of course, translates into the kind of anti-Semitic hatred on the streets of Britain, Australia, the United States and other countries.
And just very quickly, Richard, before we go, how much is Islamist ideology crippling, I would argue, British democracy? We saw the scenes in the Commons last week. We've seen this George Galloway character elected on the weekend, some pretty vile attitudes that he's been accused of in the past. And we had poor old Suella Braverman, who pointed out that Islamist activists were thwarting British democracy, and she got punted. So how much is there a real risk that now, the way the demographics are going, that British democracy is under threat from extreme Islamism?
I think it's been under threat from extreme Islamism for many years. It was under threat from this same ideology when I was working in the British Cabinet Office back in 2022 and beyond that. And it's, we're seeing politics. The current situation, which is maybe beginning to be recognised because it's been intensified by the Gaza conflict, forced the Prime Minister out onto the streets in front of number 10 Downing Street last night to deliver a message of concern about it. But it's not enough. He may be concerned. He was not specific about what he's going to do about it. He recognised that Jews in Britain are under threat. He recognised that British democracy is under threat from Islamist activism. But he didn't specify how he's going to deal with it. And my view is he will not deal with it. hand-wringing is one thing, action is another thing. And I'm not really expecting, unfortunately, any action from Rishi Sunak. I'm expecting the situation to deteriorate until Labour gets into power, when it will get much, much worse.
Well, on that cheerful note, Richard Kemp, thanks so much for chatting to us. We'll be chatting a lot more over the coming months. Let's get Suella Braverman into Downing Street. If you could organise that before the next show, we'd greatly appreciate that. Richard Kemp, thank you so much.